Alrighty, guys. Today we have a very special guest. We have Jeff Booth, the author of Price of Tomorrow. He is someone that I've been binging content when it comes to podcasts, but also listening to his audiobook multiple times because I know I'm going to miss a concept from the first time. And so, looking forward to speaking to you. Welcome to the show, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Joey. Great to see you.
I've listened to your audiobook a few times now after initially reading it. I've got the book right here, so anyone that hasn't read it, go check it out. It's called The Price of Tomorrow. And what I've really found is you really are a visionary. And when people say that, I didn't even know what that meant initially. And now I go, he's talking about AI and he says AI will move in stages of, 1 year to 1 month to then 1 week and then 1 day. And so you published that book in early 2020, almost before this big ChatGPT craze, the AI videos that are coming, these music videos that people are making, these videos that almost look like deep fakes of presidents doing crazy things. And so I think we're at that stage now. It almost feels like AI is moving within, I would say, weeks or even days, because there's always an update. There's always a new thing that's coming, something that is here to replace jobs and really change what's our society looks like. And so, what do you think? Were you almost surprised by how accurate that like sort of vision was, or are you just going, yeah, like this was the foreseeable future? And what does the next, say, 5, 10, even 20, 30 years look like? Because what I'm seeing is essentially no one's job safe. That's kind of what the reality is now. And could you maybe just deep dive into what that looks like potentially?
There's just so many connections to that question, right? In fact, that's why I went through the book, or that's why I originally published the book. Um, so, was it easy to see? Extraordinarily easy to see, right? The AI has been moving, compute, AI, things out of our brains, building new things to make us more efficient, information on top of information and error correction, has been going on for a long time. But just the AI movement alone since the 50s, at the exact same pace it's moving today. It's just an exponential pace. And people were measuring it linearly. And so they're surprised. That's why I use the paper folding analogy with to demonstrate in that paper folding analogy. If you folded a piece of paper on itself 50 times, most people guess it would be about 2 inches when it's actually from here to the sun. And I use that example not to say I'm smarter, because it's not I'm smarter, but when you're it's to use the example that everybody gets the trick. Once they hear it, they're surprised, and then they go right back to measuring linearly instead of exponentially. And our world's moving exponentially. The AI is moving exponentially, and that means for technology, what ends up happening in technology, if you just put a wrapper of technology in AI, is one part of technology. Um, and if Moore's law is moving, doubling every 18 months, where are we in relation to that? And what ends up happening to our brains in relation to that is we overestimate technology's impact in the early folds, in the 50s, in the 70s, in the 80s, all these AI hype cycles that then fell apart, and everybody said it's not going anywhere, and it's still doubling. So just like if you took a piece of paper and you folded it once, it wouldn't be very thick in the first fold. It wouldn't feel like anything happened. But in the later folds, where you're stepping up, fold 35, fold 36, and everything in the previous 18 months has doubled, and you're now going giant steps to the sun. We underestimate it by such a radical amount, and we think it's everybody else. So when you understand that pattern, and that is the pattern of all human progress, and we're part of the human progress on that pattern, and it's not really even accelerating; it's just moving at that rate. Then you can measure at that rate what will happen next, while everybody else is measuring a different pattern, and that has so many implications. It has You could start from different places to get to the same result, but but if you started with the natural state of the free market is deflation, we have to provide value to other people to get paid in a free market. And you tie what I just said into that same thing, and then what you would expect with us using tools that we're moving at that rate to compete to provide more value to society, and then and then and us using the things that give us the most value, you would expect prices to fall exponentially, and you'd expect your life to get better exponentially, at a faster and faster pace, as all of the progress of all human or mankind was in service to you. But if you're measuring from a fiat-based system, and a credit-based system can't allow deflation, then it has to take all of what I just described and concentrate it up into very few hands who are essentially telling you how to live your life. And so the question you just asked, and this is why it takes so long to understand my thesis, or it just has to play in over and over and over again, is because most people are measuring it from a different system, and they're really confused, and how fast this is moving. They can't see that the system that they're in, measuring the world from the system that they're in, is the thing that's the root cause of all the things they're worried about. Even your question presupposed, where will the jobs be? Essentially fear, right? When the point of AI, the point of us using these things, is to free our time. So the fear only comes from the existing system, where prices keep on rising higher and higher and higher, and you need the job that your currency is being debased forever to be able to pay for the things you want, because the currency is being debased. In the other system, as the job goes away, prices fall, and you don't need the job.
Something I was struggling with, like thinking about it yesterday, was when electricity came, it replaced all these people. They were like, oh no, we lost our jobs. And then it created new jobs, and then technology, and I'd say computers and all those things were on the back of that. And it sort of felt like it was almost a healthy transition. But with AI, could you maybe just explain what that looks like? Because AI was here to help us make jobs quicker, make things faster, increase productivity. But it almost feels like they're not here to set up for a new job or a new industry in some sense, because it's almost moving so fast. It's so hard to figure out what new jobs is there to pivot to. Like if your job gets replaced, what is the new pivoting job you can go to? Because it almost feels like they actually really are just here to replace us rather than building a new industry. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, and again, even your question again comes down to, when you anchored it to electricity, um, anchor it to a different spot, and then you'll see kind of the fallacy in some of the thinking, right? Not just in yours, but mine, everyone's. Um, if the natural state of the free market is deflation, right? Which is a factual statement. You could try to argue that you could, because we compete with what every entrepreneur, every person competes with what was there before. Say you as a buyer, you buy things every day, and you're always looking for the best value. And if an entrepreneur doesn't create more value for you, they fail. So the entire process of what I'm describing, right? Competing in a free market, and you only using the things that give you more value, like this Riverside app right now that we're using, that has a potential now to touch 1 billion people, where you didn't have that potential before, and it's virtually free for you. The You use the things that enable you to provide more value to other people, and so you're part of that thing. That is, new things are developed by us, and we use the things that provide us more value. And so that process that I just described has to be deflationary, because we're the users, we're the creators and the users. But now think about the implications of what I just said. Now really think about the implications I just said. It means every other framework you've ever known, communism, capitalism, totalitarianism, every political institution, every thing is wrong, like so wrong, because it was always just a control system. And as you explained electricity and what ended up happening with electricity, what you what you said is effectively this new protocol came in and lowered the price and increased the efficiency, and then there were more jobs on the other side. But you didn't hold together the other thought to that is what happened during that transition as governments tried to stop that deflation. You went to global wars because you manipulated money, and you had a whole bunch of people going through World War One, World War Two as that was accelerating, and money was being printed and dividing society, and you had to reset currencies because you were because the entire infrastructure is then the same thing's happening today. So you go to war, you convince your people that there's somebody bad in your country, you get elected, you can't solve the problem from there, so you have to convince them to go to war against another country so that you ultimately can reset the currency and start again, and then the whole thing repeats. So if we've never lived in that system that I described, then we would have a hard time even holding on to the thoughts that I'm saying. You'd have to hear it over and over and over again, and from that new system, the natural state of the free market is deflation. If you had a decentralized secure protocol that couldn't be manipulated, like a la Bitcoin, then relative to it, all prices would fall forever. And as it redistributed what all of the gains that were stolen, all of the everything that was stolen back to all humans from the natural state of the free market, you'd be living in the first time ever, and you could participate in it. But that's why it's so hard to understand. It's so new, and we don't have and it's hard to think, even if these things are true. Our cognitive dissidence won't let us, or many people, it won't let them move to the new system because they're so stuck in an old paradigm.
I think another thing that I struggle with is like the idea that there's an alternative system, which I would argue is Bitcoin and this like almost deflationary system because it's cap supply gets released actually less instead of more, which is sort of what our money does, which is just more and more capital chasing the same amount of goods and services. And what I struggle with is if there's an alternative system, but there's still the current system. And it's like, how long can they go together? Like, at what point is it just okay? We've decided on a winner. Let's just fully shift. Like, it just feels like we're in this huge transition period. But it's like, for me, I just struggle with the idea that it's an alternative system, but we still have the old system. It's like, how long does it take before the old system dies, like officially dies and gives it up? And I was sort of,
A long time,
yeah.
a long time.
So we're in the early
And
stages of this thing.
we're in the crazy early stages, Joey. Because most Bitcoiners are still measuring what I'm describing in a fiat piece of paper. So, and spending all their time and energy in the fiat piece of paper. So they're making the system. They're yelling at the system, while making it stronger. And so if that, and these systems cannot coexist for long. One has to, because they're opposites. They're directly opposites. The natural state of the free market is deflation, for sure. A credit-based system where money is lent into existence cannot allow deflation, for sure. And so through that very simple thing, like you could explain all of economics to a 5-year-old. We trade with each other to provide more value. We use the things that provide more value. We're constantly competing with each other to provide more value, and prices fall as a result. That's the entirety of economics. Add more people to that system, prices fall faster. You're in service to everyone else. You're competing in service, meaning we've never lived in it. And everything you know about economics is fundamentally wrong. Because if you can't disprove what I just said, then really what you're saying is, I don't believe that should happen. Somebody should control me. Now, underneath that, you have agency now. You get to decide. Every single person on the planet, if they understand what I just said, has agency to move their time to one system or another. And the more they spend time in the system that's producing worse and worse effects for them, yelling at that system, the more they'll see that that's insanity, because that system can't solve any problem that they worry about. In fact, every problem that you try to solve from that system gets worse. And it's not just you, me, it's every politician is doing the same thing. Every person on the planet is doing the same thing, as Bitcoin is imposing this new system that is just the free market. Now you have a choice. Which one do you want to spend more time in? And every single person on the planet has that choice. And why we were crazy early is that most people don't know they have that choice. Most people don't know that it's not somebody else, it's them.
Yeah, I find yeah, it's just I don't know, I find Bitcoin interesting because it's built on the back of 2008, and it's like, how much does that really matter like in the long term? Because if it's built on the back of potential like a global financial crisis, and so I feel almost like Satoshi Nakamoto's like perfect timing for discovery to be like, hey, here's an alternative system. But this is where I struggle when a lot of people come to me and go, what if there's a 2008 repeat? And if Bitcoin, it's in this alternative system I talk about, um, but it's still classed as an asset. It's still classed as a commodity in the original system. So that's going back to the original frame of mind. If there's a 2008 repeat and all assets are falling, all things are trending basically back to zero in some sense, like houses literally just went kaboom, and that sort of brought everything else down with it, just absolute panic. I don't really know what to tell them because, I'd probably agree that Bitcoin's price gets absolutely obliterated initially. Like there would be some sort of floor price, but are you of the opinion of that doesn't really matter? Like that price doesn't matter. That doesn't really show, I guess, Bitcoin's success story. Are you sort of saying this is a long-term thing? If there's a 2008 repeat, then it doesn't matter because we're talking about 2050 or we're talking about, so I just don't know.
So
Like,
let's go through both, because I'll help you explain it, or you can this. I think or you push back if this doesn't explain it. 2008, the credit crisis that was a deflationary spiral, it would have kept unwinding, and every bank would have failed. And every bank globally, every institution, and every business would have failed, and it would have kept on happening. So what happened to stop that? And so when you said the house prices fell and other prices fell, in that time travel prices fell, everything fell as demand just stopped, and everybody was worried about what happens next, and it started to accelerate, and everybody pulled in from spending, and then it accelerated faster and faster. And why did that happen? Because the system, the credit was the credit was insolvent, and people knew it. And if there wasn't somebody to make the solvency, then all money was at risk. And houses even lag that because you can't sell them right away. So you essentially sell everything you can to create cash because it's about to get really bad. And houses fall later. They're a lag because they're illiquid. And then you have to get under those prices, and then you have to get under them again, and you have to get under them to be able to attract a bid. And so what happened in there, right, when you're talking about 2008, what happened was trust in a global financial system that was getting worse and worse and worse, which was already insolvent, broke. And now that would have, if nothing was done, if it was a free market, the entire thing would have collapsed to zero. So what did governments do? What did you do? What did everyone do? They reflated that they printed tons of money. They said that the balance sheets of the banks, this asset, we're not going to market to value. We're going to pretend it's still this other value so that your balance sheet appears normal, right? So it looks like nobody will fail. So we're just going to change your balance sheet, and we're going to inject tons of capital, tons of manipulation of money. Where are we going to get that money? We're going to steal it from all citizens and pump it in through inflation and through, we're going to drive this in, and we're going to save the financial system from collapse. And I'm not going to get into the semantics of should they, shouldn't they, or anything else. I'm just going to into that's what was done. So it wasn't a free market. In other words, the same banks, the same people, all of the same Fed, all of the same global financial infrastructure that caused the panic got heads I win, tails I win. Where did they win from? From society. So now you had now you had systematic risk inside a system that all of the big participants, BlackRock and others, that were important parts of that financial system, knew for sure if they became systematic parts of that financial system, then they were too big to fail. So what would that do in the free market? It would create a whole bunch of other people said, I need to get big fast too, because there's no way I can lose because the government will have to bail me out. And so the same thing gets worse and worse and worse. So when you're talking about what happened in that global financial crisis so that's what happened to be able to manipulate money at a greater rate. And it's happened again and again since that happened. And by the way, it happened in 2000 in the dot-com crash, happened before that. And every one of these things, COVID, it's just a magnitude more broken money, a magnitude more coercion and control, a magnitude more backroom deals and everything else that very, very few people win and most people lose. That's what that whole thing's like. And when I say it has to be exponential each time, more and more manipulation. So the existing market has more instability in it now than in 2008, far more. And I often say, which snowflake causes the avalanche, right? Any snow, the snow is building really big, but you can't measure which snowflake is actually going to be the cause of the avalanche, right? You just know the avalanche is coming. So now, how would Bitcoin operate in that environment? It would probably sniff out the credit crisis first, and because you could sell it right away, it's liquid. People would sell it for those pieces of paper. Because they would need it, and it would fall in price. But what it would do is all of the other prices would fall faster over time, and Bitcoin would buy more things over time in that environment. And if the credit crisis kept happening, now remember, the credit crisis isn't caused by Bitcoin. The credit crisis is caused by manipulating currencies and credit and debt that can't be repaid. So that system is unstable anyways, and it's going to fail. The question is, what's going to happen as it fails, and how much more money this time do governments tell you that they have to inject into the money or into the system to drive inflation higher, to drive from that system. And just imagine what the world would look like if government said, nope, we're not going to save it. You would beg them to save it. You'd beg them to print more money, because everything would collapse from that system. So Bitcoin's immune to that. The only thing that it feels like it's not immune is because you're converting Bitcoin to the piece of paper to price things. But if you're spending in Bitcoin, all things will get cheaper in Bitcoin terms, regardless of a credit crisis or massive inflation, massive more manipulation of money. It doesn't matter. Bitcoin, all things, if you just measure in the protocol, if you measure in instead of converting it to the piece of paper, all things will get cheaper forever in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what happens if there was some sort of announcement like global financial crisis, we're back in business, and it would just be like, I can just imagine Bitcoin having some sort of floor price because there's the 4 million Bitcoin or whatever that's already lost that is forced to hold. So it's like there's already, I just can't see Bitcoin ever going to zero again. I feel like it's impossible now. And then there's all the people that have it locked up in self custody that are preparing for the long term future. And maybe they sell a percentage of their Bitcoin, but I can't see a world where Bitcoin's like $1,000 or $5,000. And this is once again priced in the fiat system. But to me, it's like,
so you can see what you're doing, and you
yeah,
can see what everybody. And as
I'm
much
already
as
playing it in my head. It's no good.
yeah, and the more you do that, the more that you do, you're reinforcing. And that's why you have to keep on. That's why it's so hard, because an inflationary system cannot compete. It cannot coexist with the free market. One has to die. One wins, one loses. Now, for a long time, by pricing in it, you're actually making the other system, the centralizing system, stronger. But it's hard to realize that we do that. So if you start spending your Bitcoin, if you start and what you're doing and teaching other people about it, and more people move their time from the system that's extracting from them to the system that's a global cooperation system, the first global free market, as they move their time, just like it's probably happened to you, your life gets better and better and better. And the more you see it, the more you start to understand it, you go deeper and deeper and deeper into that. And why won't Bitcoin go to zero? Because you're not going back. I'm not going back. Right. And I know lots of people. I know very many people who aren't going back. That's why. It's us.
Mm. There was another question I wanted to ask while I had you, and it's sort of the whole idea of protocol versus technology, because I find this really interesting with Bitcoin because I feel like it has layers. Like I feel like there is an element of it's just the technology, but there's also this protocol that it's built on. And a lot of people would come to me and say, you say it's protocol takes all, like winner takes all type thing, and technology is winner takes most. And I agree with that. But then they all come to me and say, yeah, but Bitcoin is technically in the cryptocurrency basket. Yes, it's won the most out of everyone, but look at all these competitors. So therefore, it's a technology because it hasn't won all, it's just won most. How would you sort of counter the layers of Bitcoin, the difference between Bitcoin as a protocol and then Bitcoin as the coin and the token and the money on top of the network? Like, I don't know how to really deep dive into that. Is that something that you could maybe expand on?
Yeah, I wrote an article years ago now called "Finding Signal in a Noisy World" that I'd recommend. It's one of those ones I think you need to read multiple times, um, but it explains exactly why and what the world would look like under this confusion. So think about all the confusion that people are going through. Number one, we don't see protocols very often, and as they're being developed, there's a whole, like, if you think about the internet being developed, and I'm talking about the internet from not from 1989 when most people think it was being developed. That was the layers were all there, and then the free market was building on top of that. Um, and when I say free market, without money being part of that internet, it was never really a free market. It was a consolidation of things because of money. But all of the entrepreneurs building on top of that, like from 1989, it was 2000, 2007, 2006 that the iPhone came out using the same software, the protocol stack. All of what we're using now, all of that came 20 years after, 15, 20 years after. The protocol was there as people realized what they could do with it. And it was misunderstood the entire time. So in the late 90s, when I started my technology business, realizing what this was capable of, I was laughed out of the room most times because people really didn't think that they were still measuring what was going to happen with the internet from their previous lens of what the world looked like. So people just couldn't see how fast that was moving. So now when you say what Bitcoin is, you have to go back not to 1989, you have to go to 1969, which is the base layer of the internet with TCP/IP. And I'm simplifying it. It changed a couple times, but in that, and then you have to watch what happened out of all the competition for intranets and different things and closed systems as companies and control systems tried to co-opt the internet, the open, and then the layers that got developed on top of it that added more functionality to the internet that created a winner take all. There's only one internet. You can even in China you can access with a VPN the entire internet. Right? It's impossible to stop, right? And so you could be in a totalitarian control system like North Korea. You could ban your people from having computers and or phone lines and everything else, and you can lock off all building. But what happens to a country like that, because they're not participating in the growth of it, is it stagnates, and you have literally it's an entirely control system. So you can't stop something like that. That's what Bitcoin is. To see why though, and now what would that look like if everything I said was true? And people should push back on this and see, is this true? What would it appear to a whole bunch of people who aren't very good at understanding where the world's going? Right? Just ask yourself: 10 years ago, did you think what we would see today in the world? Or have you changed your mind almost every day as the news media feeds it? And you'll see how bad you are at predicting the future. Right? And I'm not saying that just the majority of people predict the present forward. They don't predict the future. Right? They're just, and it's not a bad thing. It just is. So it's hard to think in these types of things and go back into the first principles, especially when your world you're operating on isn't operating in first principles, it's operating in the control system. So now what would happen? What would this appear to for the world to go through? So you have all of the technology is moving really fast. Everything's changing at all different things. You're inside a control system that's manipulating money. It's really confusing. It's easier just to go on with your daily life and put that's somebody else's hands. It's just too much. I'm going to bury my head in the sand, or I'm going to listen to a politician tell me why I should hate the other guy. Right? I'm caught in this. So what would that feel like if now you had this new thing that was a protocol, and it appeared to you that these Bitcoiners were just getting rich for doing nothing, just holding, doing nothing, right? All they did is bought this thing, and they held it, and they were operating in the first free market. And so it would appear from this system, oh my God, what's happening? Like I need, and it would also appear from the same system that a bunch of people would try to change Bitcoin at the protocol. Vitalik would be a Bitcoiner, and he would say, "You won't change Bitcoin, and it won't do more. So I'm going to create a new coin called Ethereum that's going to be the world computer. Um, and as I create the world computer, because most people think in that, a lot of these people that didn't get rich in Bitcoin, they're going to go to my thing, and I'm gonna tell them that it's going to do more, right? It's going to be able to do, and a whole bunch of people would do that, and then Solana and every other coin in the world, because people were confused by what was happening in Bitcoin. It was repricing the world rather than, but they were thinking it's going up in value, and all these other coins are going to go up in value, and they're thinking in technologies that the new coin must be able to provide more. It would be a very confusing topic for all of these people stuck in that system that didn't do the work to understand what Bitcoin really is as protocol and developing in layers, and all of these other things that were um, that people were selling had trade-offs to centralization or security. So they all had to be centralized. Um, so now, if you ask, how could you create decentralized finance, DeFi, on a centralized blockchain? How could you? All a blockchain is a high-cost database. Why, if you're going to centralize, why would you ever use a high-cost database? You just use a database. Um, and and so I would just recommend in this topic, read Finding Signal in a Noisy World. Read it again and again and again, and you'll see that protocols are winner take all. You'll see exactly what the difference between all of these other coins are. But you have to do ultimately, why this is hard for people is you have to do the work yourself. Um, and there's a million people billions of people wanting to take your money, selling you some other token in a really confusing world, or trying to scam you. And so that's the way the market would look. It would have to look like this if we're going through this transition. And Bitcoin would have to withstand everything I just said and way more if it was going to be the protocol, a winner take all, everything else. It would have to look exactly like it looks today. It won't look like that in the future.
Yeah, you often say like Bitcoin needs to remain decentralized and secure in order to fulfill its long-term purpose, like in order to continue and survive. Um, do you think, I don't know if this is something you've talked about before, but do you think the current knots versus core debate concerns this thesis, or do you think that's just noise long term? Is this just going to be a blip in time?
I think all of these things and more are coming. I think this is exactly why the soul of Bitcoin. I'm not, and I don't want to get into all people on core are bad, because that's not the case either. Like, there's some really good people that have a different view of what this looks like, and but let's just instead of going into that debate, let's say, what does that debate do? There, for a time, people used to come at me all the time and say that centralized system, it has so much power that if the CIA and other three-letter agencies could co-opt governments, and they could co-opt everyone, and all of this dark money comes and convinces people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. How could Core withstand that? How could this group of developers withstand that? And I used to say, if that happened, and Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is us, these tens of thousands of nodes globally distributed, if that happened, what would happen is a new instance of Core would emerge that wasn't that, because it's us. We're the choosers. And so now you look through that same lens, and I'm not saying that's happening with Core at all yet. What I'm saying is what you're seeing play out is the free market building resiliency into this, because it won't be co-opted. It won't be good, because people will stand up and say, I believe this is right. I believe that um, that people trying to centralize Bitcoin through monkey JPEGs That's a terrible use of Bitcoin at the protocol. If you want to do it a different layer of your database on top of this, you go ahead. But we're not going to risk money that can't be co-opted for monkey JPEGs. And then every single person in Bitcoin community and others who are running nodes have an option themselves to say, who do I believe? Which version of this truth am I for?
Yeah, it's interesting watching things like MSTR like eat up so much of the supply because I do get this like fear that maybe long term MSTR, like what if it gets nationalized or something happens where it's like, the US comes in and swoops that up. I don't know how that looks or what if that's even possible. But I do get stressed when companies are taking advantage of the old system by taking on that amount of debt at, potentially 0% interest. It's so low. They're taking advantage of the old system to pump the new system. And I don't know, I just get a little bit stressed about that. Do you have thoughts on what considers a safe like treasury company, or do you think it's just something you need to be mindful that, hey, this is not pure Bitcoin? Like, what are those core differences?
You keep going back to the first principle of the natural state of the free market is deflation. A credit-based system can't allow it, right? So the credit-based system has to centralize. These two things are every time. And by the way, what Michael's doing and a whole bunch of others, they're great. They're great people. They're advocating for, and a bunch of people learn about Bitcoin through that thing, and then they go deeper. But every time you're out of self-custody, you are imposing a risk on yourself. Every time, if you're not running a node, you have no vote in this. And there's the risk isn't the risk for you if the government seizes MicroStrategy's Bitcoin. There's no risk for you. Like tune it completely out, run a node, and advocate for the Bitcoin that you want. And when the government says you can't use this Bitcoin, and it's going to only be the US coin, those nodes will say that US coin will look a lot like Bitcoin Cash. And at some point, and who knows if that's the path? It's one plausible path out of these because the systems cannot coexist. But it doesn't much matter if you're running a node and you're advocating for this, you're spending in it, you're running an economic node that node is attached to your own Bitcoin. You're immune from all of this chaos that's going to happen. A lot of people won't be immune because they will have trusted what they think is Bitcoin to a paper instrument of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think self custody is really just self responsibility when it comes to your money. It's like, I will take this burden on to look after my money. Like, this is my security, whatever. And it's really in your hands. Like, it's the first time people don't just handball the responsibility to someone else. So no wonder it scares everyone. Like, the idea of taking it into cold storage is such a foreign concept, something digital. You can literally transfer it on an SD card into a device. It's just, yeah, like no wonder it's scary because no one's ever actually had that responsibility. It's constantly, oh, if someone steals my money, I'll call the bank and they can refund me, whether the merchant gets the money back or not. It's just credit. So that does scare a lot of people.
So that's yeah. And Joey, if you just go on to, that's actually why the learning process and why it takes so much time, because you have to, and all of these are so when you get asked questions about this from people who haven't done the work to understand how they have agency in this and they're the ones that protect it, it would naturally seem to them, this is too confusing, I'm just going to trust the what I've always known. Right? It's that agency. It's that agency that is actually changing the system we live in to the new system, and we all have our own role in it.
Yeah, I've been in Bitcoin like for quite a while, and I still like sometimes I'll leave Bitcoin on exchanges just because I'm like, oh, imagine if I move it wrong. What if this happens? Like my brain instantly, there's still like that fear. Like I don't have that confidence yet. And I know like cold storage and the wallets and everything, I fully trust, but it's more I don't trust myself. Like I don't trust myself with this amount of capital taking it in offline mode. Like it seems kind of scary. But I'm getting there, and like I have confidence that, you know, in the future I will be feel more secure than I do now. Um, and just one last thing I wanted to touch on, like, what is some advice you could give to Gen Z? Like, I'm 21. I'm looking at the world. Everything's just getting more and more expensive. There's a lot of fear at this age. A lot of people are scared to get married, get settled down, buy a house, the old, you know, American slash Australian dream. What is some advice you could give to Gen Z that are concerned about the jobs, concerned about financial security and the future of this world? What's something that you could leave a nugget of gold for them before we wrap up this episode?
Your responsibility in the free market is to provide value to others. Whether you work for a team that's providing value for others, whether you do it yourself, um, that's your responsibility in this. In a world that's going through so much chaos from a system change to another, what would it look like in that chaos? If you really learned, not what other people are telling you, you find out for yourself what this looks like. That would appear to be a huge advantage to help 8 billion people understand what's happening. It would be what you're doing yourself, Joy, by just doing a podcast, reaching out to me to come on your podcast. You're touching a bunch of people. If you continue to do that really well, your value that you're providing them will explode, and you will do extraordinarily well in the new system by helping out other people. And this is available to any single person, everyone, the entire thing. So where can you provide more value to society, and just keep doing that. And then if it's not working, it's not everybody conspiring against you. It's you. Because people just think about the things you use. When something provides you value, you move instantly.
So you're saying is I have to take self-responsibility. I can't rely on someone else. Oh, that sucks. No. No, that's good advice. I appreciate that. Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciated this. I was looking forward to this for a long, long time. And I feel like I have a lot to ponder on, and I might have to rewatch this episode myself. And I'm very sure that the listeners enjoyed this episode, and maybe we can do this again in a few months or something.
You bet. Great seeing you.
Thanks, Jeff. See ya.
And congrats at 21. You're well ahead of the curve.
Yeah, cheers.
See ya.